Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today at the Smart Growth Subcabinet public meeting. Appreciate you tuning in. Based on our numbers, I think we have about over 100 people that pre-registered to be part of the meeting this morning, including both elected officials, government, planning folks, and the general public who are just interested in this topic. So thank you for taking time and being here. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. The meeting is being recorded, and it will be posted to our website, along with today's presentation will be posted there at the Smart Growth Subcabinet page of the Maryland Department of Planning website. And so I just want you to know that that information will be there for your reference after today's meetings. So great. With that, it's a little hard. We have a few people here in the room and we have many virtual. So bear with us as we try to ensure that we're acknowledging and moving along through this to share with you the information we have today. So I am going to just give you some guidance next. For those of you from the public out there joining us today, just know that because of these virtual meeting formats, they're never as robust as when we can just all be in one room together. So we do have to kind of live with that, in which case, if you do have any comments along the way, these are the instructions for putting those comments or questions into that question box on your screen. You should see that, and please just put those in there. The other thing that I want to make note of is that because of this type of format, we won't have a Q&A per se, but we are taking all of the questions that came in through the pre-registration. And particularly encourage you all, even after today, if you have comments, we do have a comment form set up on that web page. We do look at all of those, and we'll be bringing them to each of these subcabinet meetings in 2024 to ensure that we are aware of what's on your mind out there and including that in our discussions as a subcabinet. So today, use the question box if you didn't already use your pre-registration questions or comments in your pre-registration form. And then, of course, there is the form on the website also at that link that I'm showing there, but it'll be in this presentation when you load it later. So those are just general instructions. With that, we're going to move into the agenda next and just overview with you what we're planning for today. We can advance that slide. So today we have an hour. And with that, first of all, we're going to go through a quick roll call. I'll just identify everyone's here from all of our agencies are represented and go through who is on. So you will know that the subcabinet is alive and well and working, and we're getting good cross-agency collaboration through the subcabinet. So we'll go through that roll call and I'll just name off those folks. The next thing we're going to do is just give you a quick year in review, what's happened this year. And we have a few slides to share with you related to this year and what we've been doing and what we've been up to. You heard some of that back in August when we did our other public meeting of the year at the MACO conference. And this is sort of just a year-end wrap-up of some of the key things to share with you. The next thing we're going to go into, part of our activity this year has been focusing on, well, what do we need? We're all new for the most part at the subcabinet. So we've had to come up to speed, think about what can we be doing as a subcabinet going into 2024. So we're going to go through with you what we've identified as some priority new initiatives that we'll be working through in 2024. That'll be the next segment. And then we'll take a moment after that and read any of the new comments that have come in during that time frame, the 15-minute time frame that we've allowed there, and basically read those out loud so that everyone can hear them, so the subcabinet members can hear them. And then what I've asked the subcabinet members to do as part of the closing round is to either respond to any of those comments, provide any overall observations about their first year on the subcabinet, and thoughts of how we move forward as part of their closing round of comments, and then we'll adjourn at 11 o'clock. So hopefully that all makes sense to you all, and we are going to, with that, dive in with the roll call. I'm just going to read out who we know to be here. I apologize if some of the names have not been, as of the last hour, been fully updated, but I am just going to go ahead and name who I believe or to know that's online. So with Department of Agriculture, we have Michelle Cable, who is representing Secretary Addix. With Budget and Management, we have Secretary Grady with us here today. With Commerce, Secretary Anderson sends his apologies, as do any that can't be here directly. And he has sent Jim Palma with Commerce to act as his representative today. With the Department of Environment, Secretary McElwain has sent Les Knapp as her representative today. With Department of General Services, we have Secretary Chaudhry here with us, actually in the room with us today. With the Department of Health, Secretary Herrera Scott has sent Katie Bide to be her representative today for today's meeting. With Higher Education, Dr. Rai has sent Jeffrey Newman, that's representing Higher Education here today. With Housing and Community Development, we have Secretary Day with us online. And then Assistant Secretary of Department of Community Development is also a specific member of this subcabinet. So we have Carol Gilbert, who's the Assistant Secretary there, represented here today and in the room with me. With Labor, Secretary Wu has sent Jason Perkins Cohen to represent her at the meeting today. With Natural Resources, Secretary Kurtz has sent Dave Goshorn, who is representing Natural Resources on our meeting today. With Transportation, Secretary Wiedefeld has sent Candice Holford, who will be representing him today at the meeting. With the Maryland Energy Administration, Director Pinsky has sent Chris Rice, who is with us here today. The Governor's Office representative is Deputy Chief of Staff Shana Hernandez, who is also here with to Governor Glendenning. And through that wisdom, through the work that was done, I think we've had a lot of progress in terms of, trying to get out in front of sprawling development and being more focused in our investments. And so a lot to, I think, be happy about in terms of 25 years of implementing programs. But over the years, other things have been added. Things need to be aligned better, and that's what this particular subcabinet is going to be very much focused on. And at this point in time, I've been working in the realm of sustainable development, smart growth, my entire 40-year career. And I've seen it evolve greatly over the years. And I think the biggest thing that if I can summarize it is we need to focus not only on where we build and how we develop, where we develop, but I think it's become evident that we also need to be thinking about how we develop and being more, I think, engaged with that as a subcabinet. So that is one of the areas that we felt needed to be addressed in terms of how can we better balance economic development and growth with issues of equity to ensure, that we do leave no one behind in terms of our growth. And then, of course, always being in balance with our environmental values. And so really looking at evolving from smart growth to more of this term I think many of us are familiar with, and that's sustainable growth. And that's really about balance. We have worked directly with the governor's office and really looked at how can we ensure that there's a renewed commitment to this work and the importance of it. And so we have essentially recommended a name change to sustainable growth. And I believe, working with all of my colleagues on the cabinet and other secretaries, we are all extremely committed to cross-agency collaboration. And I think this subcabinet is a great forum for that, as it was originally intended. And then just overall reinvigorating, but really focusing on what it's about. How do we create healthy, thriving communities? How can we all be working together to accomplish that? So that's a little bit about what our thinking was, what's behind this recommendation that we are making, essentially. And the next slide, I think, just gives you a little bit more of a summary of what I just reviewed, focusing, evolving from not only where, but how, heavier focus on neighborhood vitality, really adding resiliency and equity as really crucial issues that need to be part of our cross-cutting work. and then some change in leadership, which really just better aligns with how it's essentially been operating for over the last decade or more, but just cleaning up the legislation so that we reflect that better. And for Maryland Department of Planning, which has been staffing and essentially leading this for the entire duration, and then also recognizing the key partner in this, which is Department of Housing and Community Development and Secretary Day. And I will be working very much in partnership in how we move forward with the subcabinet and its duties moving forward. So that's just sort of a little bit of a preview of some of the things that we found that needed to be updated as we move forward into next year. The second thing in terms of our year in review, you noticed on my bulleted list, there were 3 particular legislative assignments that we've had. We've been tracking, engaging, and getting involved in those 3 assignments directly as a subcabinet, and we're thankful to the staff that have been moving those along. And I'm going to ask each of the agencies that are taking the lead on each of these to give you all a brief report on the status of those particular assignments and let you know that we've been working away on that. So we're going to start with the preservation and reuse of historic complexes study, and Assistant Secretary Carol Gilbert with DHCD is going to give you that update.
Thank you, Secretary Flora. This is a report that was required by legislation in the 2023 session. And the idea behind the report was to review activity and recommendations made in the past relative to what we refer to as historic complexes, campuses that may have had a previous life as a hospital campus or a military campus, but have lost that purpose, and in some cases are abandoned and in decline physically. And so this report reviewed past efforts looking at this issue and refreshed, and is going to prioritize some recommendations toward the better preservation and reuse of these valuable properties, some of which are in your communities. For example, Pikesville Armory, just north of the Baltimore City line in Pikesville, Fort Ritchie in a very beautiful rural area of Washington County, and a complex called the Warfield Complex outside of Sykesville is another large former hospital complex. So these sites have multiple buildings and have multiple challenges relative to stabilization and reuse and market potential for reuse. But at the end of the day, they're also irreplaceable in terms of the solidity and beauty of their architecture and potential for accommodating new purposes. So keep an eye out. By the end of the year, we're required to submit the report to the governor and the presiding officers of the Maryland Senate and House of Delegates, and then it will be made public soon after.
Great. Thanks, Carol. Thanks for that report. The next up, the other second assignment we had was Maryland the Beautiful Plan, SB 470, and Department of Natural Resources was the lead agency moving forward and working on that one. And we have David Gosshorn with us today from DNR, who's going to report on the progress with that particular assignment.
Thank you, Secretary Flora. Dave Gosshorn with DNR. Yeah, so the Maryland the Beautiful Act passed last session, 2023 session, and it was passed in recognition of the value of preserving our natural lands, not just for their environmental benefits, but also the highly recognized benefits of our ability to connect people to nature for recreational purposes, to get outside and enjoy all the beauty that we have in Maryland. The bill basically set 2 goals for us. One was to conserve 30% of state lands by 2030 and then 40% of state lands by 2040. The good news is that the first of those 2 goals we're in great shape on. As of this past June 30th, we have protected 1,847,428 acres, which in Maryland, which comes to 99.5% of our 30% by 2030 goal. So we basically have 7 years to get the next 1/2 of 1%. So that's so not only will we, I think it's very safe to say, will we meet that, we'll exceed that goal. So that's obviously very good news, and that's a testament to all the work that's gone in, actually, frankly, over the last several decades on land preservation in Maryland. Meeting the 40% by 2040 goal is going to be much more challenging, and is a function of a lot of things, as I assume folks can imagine. Obviously, funding for our various land preservation programs, but much more beyond that. The status of the real estate market, how many willing sellers we have out there, how well we're working together with. There's a variety of programs that preserve land in Maryland, and how well we're all working together. So that's going to be a much more challenging goal to reach. DNR is working with our partners in the Smart Growth Subcabinet, and in particular, Department of Planning, the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation, Maryland Environmental Trust, and others on a strategy of how we best work together, use the resources we have available to us to meet that goal. And we'll be working closely with the Subcabinet going forward on that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Thanks for all the work y'all are in the group is doing with that. The next one that we have to report on in terms of our legislative assignments are the Equitable and Inclusive Transit-Oriented Development Enhancement Act, HB 12. And we have Candice Holford with Maryland Department of Transportation, who's going to give us an update on that particular work. Thanks, Candice.
Thank you. Thanks, Secretary Flora. Good morning. So House Bill 12, the Equitable and Inclusive Transit-Oriented Development Act, in which the Subcabinet is actually responsible for designating transit-oriented development, TOD designations. It establishes that the Smart Growth is also responsible for eligibility requirements and establishing objective scoring standards. So a subgroup has been established. It consists of MDOT, MDP, Commerce, Labor, DHCD, DGS, DOE, and Smart Growth, National Coalition for Smart Growth. And within that subgroup, there are 2 goals. So recommending eligibility requirements to the Subcabinet, and then recommending criteria for the TOD designations. So the subgroup has met a couple of times to begin work on developing those designation criteria and the scoring criteria for the TOD grant assistance. They've met in August, once in October, and we have our next meeting on Monday, actually. So the goal there is with the intention of bringing a recommendation for the criteria to the Subcabinet in early 2024. So that's where we stand right now, and we look forward to bringing that report to the Subcabinet for feedback.
Great. Thanks, Candice. Thanks for that update and all the good work. Okay, we're going to move right along here. We lost a few minutes with our startup and technical, so we're going to try to make up some time. The last thing we wanted to just share with you is our primary metric for really looking at smart growth and how we're doing in the overall state is through the amount of spending that occurs within the priority funding areas. And we have hot off the press data on that that's been reporting in from the agencies that are associated with that spending. And as you can see, basically about $2 billion of growth-related spending in 2023 fiscal year associated with growth-related spending. And then you can see the breakout of the different agencies and where that spending is basically broken down, primarily, as you can see, from Department of Housing and Community Development and Maryland Department of Transportation, although MDE does have 5% there, DGS has a 1% amount and Commerce at 4% in terms of the breakout of how that money is all moving through and how we get that reporting and the agencies that it's coming from. Maryland Department of Planning is responsible for basically producing the report of the subcabinet, and this is our primary indicator in that report. Then you can see some of the other breakouts in terms of percent that was within PFAs, outside, percent of spending associated with projects that weren't necessarily place specific. And so that gives you a pretty good overview of what we track and include in our annual report in terms of spending. So next slide. Okay, so that's a little bit about this year, not only calendar year, but also fiscal year 23. We're going to move into the new initiatives, and I'm going to ask each of the agencies represented by these to just do a real quick overview. Keep in mind to the public that's out there is that these are really just getting off the ground. These are essentially titles. And we've sort of set some purpose statements and objectives, but we have yet to actually start pulling these working groups together to sit down and start putting together a very specific work plan. But they do reflect some of the topics that we as a group, as a subcabinet and interagency forum, felt were really critical issues out there that could be supplemented and supported and helped through this forum of the subcabinet. So we're going to start with the first one, affordable housing, barriers to housing development and solutions. And we have Secretary Day online who's going to say a few words about this one.
Thank you, Chair Flora. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
So starting with the first item, which is or initiative, which is state barriers to housing development and solutions. By way of background, we recognize that there's a significant housing shortage of, depending on the study you read, between 96,000 and 150,000 housing units in Maryland, with an outsized effect on low income and vulnerable populations. And the friction points for resolving this crisis are, one, obviously cost, and two, regulatory barriers to developing housing. And often this discussion is focused squarely on the local barriers, the local regulatory barriers to growth and affordable housing, recognizing the crucial role that local government plays in land use decisions. But the purpose of this initiative in 2024 will be to understand the interaction between state level regulations and housing development, acknowledging that the state does have a role to play and wants to be participatory with local government in reducing those barriers. There are two objectives that you can read here on the slide, but they're ultimately to identify what the regulatory frameworks that affect housing development are, how they interact, and then ultimately to determine how we reduce those regulatory barriers without negative environmental or economic or social consequences.
Great. Thanks, Secretary Day. As we all know, this is a really important issue that we hear wherever we go across the state. So thank you. Subcabinet looks forward to working with you and your team on this. The next one up is another DHCD item that was brought forth through our prioritization process, and that's the Sustainable Communities Framework and Action Plan update. And Secretary Day, I believe you're going to report on this one also.
Yes, so again, thank you, Madam Chair. The Sustainable Communities Framework, again, by way of background, supports place-based designation. And this offers a suite of resources that support strategies for community development and revitalization and ultimately community sustainability. And the program allows designated areas to apply for different state funding sources to complete projects that support those strategies. So the purpose of this initiative is to update the Sustainable Communities Plan and Framework to reflect not only current best practices, but also in planning and revitalization efforts, but also Governor Moore's priorities and the Smart Growth Subcabinet's evolving approach over 20, 30 plus years to sustainable growth. And again, there are two objectives here. The first is to revise the Sustainable Communities Plan framework, as I described, and second, to increase the way in which multiple state agencies collaborate on supporting those strategies and those initiatives in our sustainable.
Great. Thank you, Secretary Day. I think we're all looking forward to working on this one also and getting better alignment across all of our work. The next one up is a model complete streets initiative that Maryland Department of Transportation is taking the lead on, and will be leveraging the Smart Growth Subcabinet to help with this work. And I believe we have Candice Holford with MDOT that's going to give you a preview of this one.
Great, thank you, Secretary Flora. So as the lead agency, MDOT is hoping to reintroduce complete streets to the subcabinet and introduce it as an approach to planning and designing and constructing streets that are safe for all users. We're looking at it as emphasizing the needs of underserved populations and vulnerable users, and complementing our Vision Zero strategy through safer roads and safer speeds. So the purpose of this initiative would be improving safety and access to transportation for all users of all ages, abilities, and income levels by modeling the best practices in sustainable transportation planning and multimodal facility design to advance us to our Vision Zero and our carbon reduction goals. Objectives, elevating multimodal, so multiple modes, and non-motorized projects supported by a low-stress network, and making context-driven decision-making the default approach to designing our transportation network by establishing a complete streets program and making sure that program is engaging communities to provide safe and diverse transportation options that connect them to opportunity. So we're looking forward to building that out through the subcabinet and working with all of our partner agencies on this effort.
Great, thank you, Candice. So the next few are the Maryland Department of Planning will be taking the lead on. And I'm gonna try to move through these they're all kind of a collective under this umbrella of how do we think about sustainable growth, because there's different pieces to that. The first one is that we have found that essentially through statute, there is the state economic growth, resource protection, and planning policy. And there's 12 visions associated with that have been essentially what we have followed over the years. What it's become apparent is that they need to be updated, as with many other things that this subcabinet is committed to doing to essentially better reflect a sustainable growth policy. So as you can see, some of the objectives relate to, basically ensuring, first of all, engaging stakeholders. So we will be doing stakeholder engagement on this one to really better understand, well, what should those priorities, what should those visions be moving forward, what needs to be updated, excuse me, for better alignment, all looking towards this balance of equity, environment, and economics in terms of how we really think about what does sustainable growth mean in the state of Maryland in 2024 and beyond, and really be looking forward to what that should be in a very holistic way. And then how does that inform policy? Because a lot of policy, I've learned as a new secretary, a lot of policy refers back to this. If the original route isn't up to date and in keeping with the times, then maybe we're not on the right path. So we're going to be taking a pretty deep dive at this. The next one moving forward is related to how do we know we're making progress? What are the metrics? How do we know that the work that we're doing is actually moving the bar, so to speak? And what is the bar? What are those measures? So we're going to take a deeper dive into really understanding what are the right set of metrics to help inform us, to guide data-driven decision-making, as the governor has said repeatedly, needs to be guiding how we're making decisions and how we're investing. So we're going to be looking at several objectives under this and to try to come up with something to really guide our decision-making, our investment in a much more tangible, quantitative way beyond just the investment that's being made, as you saw in the earlier slide, which is now currently our primary objective. The third that basically is part of that umbrella is if you can sort of visualize this, what is the policy saying? What do we need to update? How do we measure where we're going? And then how do we reward success? How do we reward those folks that are truly moving in that direction, that are, doing best practices? We've had the Sustainable Growth Award that Maryland Department of Planning has been operating for several years. In fact, we're about to announce this year's awardees. But we felt that really this needs to be something that the subcabinet becomes part of. We're all seeing great projects, and how can we work collectively to really bring forth the best of the best and to showcase those as best practices in the state, and I think to shine a light on them. So we're going to be changing up how we do the award process, and rather than just being a Department of Planning award program, in the coming years, it'll be a subcabinet award program. So just a little preview there. The final one is around research, which really rolls into our partnership with the universities, really identifying those challenging topics, helping to identifying those that might get in the way of more sustainable, equitable growth. And I'm going to roll straight into the next one, which is working with our university partners in the National Center for Smart Growth, who's going to be also doing a couple pieces of related research. And I'm going to ask Kate Howell, with the National Director of the National Center for Smart Growth, to talk about the initiatives that they're going to help lead us with as part of the subcabinet. Kate?
Good morning. Yes, thank you, Secretary Flora. So I think a lot of the two initiatives that we've looked at is essentially ask the question, how can we better support the subcabinet and the surrounding communities as you're making decisions? And so the first of these is looking at a smart sustainable growth indicator tool. We know that sustainable growth requires trade-offs and really thinking about balancing, as we've talked about, these questions of equity and environment and economy. And so to do that, we need data to better understand what that looks like and what are the implications on our communities. So that's really what this really starts to look at. And then the next slide, please. The next piece is understanding that we can't be everywhere all the time at the University of Maryland. I know TERP alums would say, how is that possible? But truly, we know that we have incredible intellectual power across the state and all of the Maryland, the state universities. There's part of the state system. And so we'd like to start building partnerships with folks who are out in other parts of the state who can do policy relevant research and support strong decision making, as well as kind of understanding how we're doing as a state with these initiatives that we've been talking about. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And some of you may know Kate is the new director this year, and so we're looking forward to that partnership as we move forward. Okay, we're in the public comment portion. Chuck Boyd, who is operating the technology side for us. Chuck, are we able to show those public comments that have come in during this portion?
I don't really show them.
Okay, can you read them?
The best thing is to, I would suggest going and looking at some of the comments that were submitted in advance.
Okay.
As ones to do. We do have comments that I will look at, but to be honest with you, I'm not seeing a whole lot, but I'm going to check that real quick here.
Okay, so I'm going to read a few of the ones that have come in through the registration form and the comment form. I'm just going to remind everybody that's out there, we do want to hear from you. When we are listening, we are bringing those forward as part of our decision making. We're committed, particularly as we go into next year, now that we have some of this up and running, to ensure that those comments that come in through the form on the web page are shared with the subcabinet at each of our meetings. And we are also, I want to make sure that you all know, we will be doing 2 public meetings again next year, 1 virtual, 1 in person. We will do an in-person one again at MACO in August, and in a virtual one again next year. I believe the schedule says for December, but throughout the year, we want to hear from you. So please use that public comment form, and we'll make sure and share those with the subcabinet. We won't be able to answer everything necessarily, but we will do our best to bring everything into consideration as we move forward on some of our new initiatives in particular. So a couple of the comments that I'm just going to read out loud during this segment before we move to closing round. Do you have one there, Chuck, that I should read?
One received from Larry Fulgerson that said MVP and other state agencies have the responsibilities for reviewing, commenting, and in some cases approving local master and functional water, sewer, water and sewer, solid waste, LPRP plans. How will the sustainable growth policies and priorities be integrated into the state's how the state carries out these review and approval responsibilities? So that's a good question that we can share with our state agency partners.
Yes, I really appreciate that question. I think that's a longer conversation, but I'm glad to know that you all are thinking about that as a big part of what will be some of these new initiatives and working groups. So thank you for registering that. Any other? That's the only one that came in. A couple on the forms that came in that I'll refer to. This was an interesting one. How is the subcabinet planning for longevity? Currently, over 37% of the population is over 50 years of age, and many will live to 100. I think that's going to have to be a big factor as we think about our housing needs, our transportation needs, how communities basically can support various populations of all kinds and of all needs. And so I believe that that will very much be embedded into some of the work of the new initiatives that you just heard about. Another one is how the local citizenry, especially that of emerging developers, can participate in smart growth planning and implementation efforts. One of the most important things is we need to know what you're thinking, what your issues are. Please submit those through the forum. I wish we could get out and promise to get out to every corner of the state. We're doing that through the cabinet. The governor's been very committed to be in every county in the state, and those have been really terrific. And hearing firsthand from the various counties, I certainly as Secretary of Planning, and I know all the other secretaries as we attend those are, using those opportunities to also reach out and hear what's going on the ground. And so we're using those opportunities. I know each of the agencies is doing their own reach out, and I think as a subcabinet, my hope is through the forum submission process and then through some of the engagement processes we'll be doing on some of those initiatives, we'll be able to hear directly from you. Any others that came in?
Nope, nothing.
Okay, I'm going to read maybe one more of these, and then we're just going to go ahead and move towards our closing round because I would like the other secretaries to maybe add anything, having seen some of the questions that came in advance and anything that they may want to share as observations or of the work of the subcabinet as we move into next year. I think one of these things, I'll read another one here. Consider all objectives, not just affordable housing, especially established neighborhoods, stormwater problems, and wildlife. So I think our shift towards more of a sustainable growth and balancing all of these things is the ongoing challenge. We need and we must have economic growth, and we must do that in a very thoughtful, balanced way. So we hear you. I think that's going to be a big part of how we operate as a subcabinet to encourage that cross-agency collaboration so all of the issues are balanced. With that, I think thank you for being here. What I'd like to offer next is that I'm going to essentially go back through the roll call and ask each of the subcabinet secretaries in the time we have remaining to share any reflection they may have, or if there's any particular question that came in that really resonated with them, to be able to respond to that. And we'll just do a closing round. And so we're going to actually mix it up this time. Not to pick on anybody, but rather than starting with A for agriculture, I'm going to actually, Director Howell, Kate Howell, maybe put you on the spot first with the National Center for Smart Growth to share any short closing round reflection.
No, actually, I would say that I don't have anything to share on this one. Thank you, though.
Okay, sorry to put you on the spot first. I'm going to go to Chris Rice with Maryland Energy Administration. Anything that you would like to share to the public related to your role on the subcabinet or any of the questions that came up.
Sure, and thank you very much. There was a question regarding solar incentives that came in, and I would just say that MEA offers a comprehensive suite of incentives ranging from renewable energy efficiency, and alternative transportation, specifically zero emission transportation incentives. There's about 25 programs we offer, and if there is something that we do not offer, we have a program called Open, which provides an opportunity for people to push us unsolicited proposals. And so we're happy to work with nonprofits, residential customers, commercial, industrial, as well as local governments. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to actually jump to, we have two agencies that have been participating this year that are unofficial participants, but have expressed interest and we know tie to much of what we're doing. So I'm going to actually call on Secretary Savage with Department of Information Technology, who's been participating, to ask if she would like to add any comments to the group. If you're still out there with us, Secretary. Okay, I can't see everybody that's online, so I'm just going to keep moving along then. We also have Department of Emergency Management. As we mentioned, resiliency is a very important topic right now. We have Vanessa Caliban with us from the Department of Emergency Management. Vanessa, is there anything like you would like to share from the emergency management perspective?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Secretary Strickland is very appreciative of the opportunity to coordinate with you all in the future on various resiliency initiatives, especially as we look into the future and analyzing the incoming impacts of climate change on our communities and how disaster preparedness can play a part in that. We also have a new Chief Resiliency Officer in the Department of Emergency Management, so we'll be looking forward to getting him introduced to everyone and hopefully be able to provide some perspective. So thank you very much.
Thanks for being here, Vanessa. Next, I'm going to go over to the governor's office and ask if Assistant Chief of Staff, Deputy Chief of Staff, Shana Hernandez would like to add anything.
Just wanted to thank you for your leadership, Secretary. This is a topic that's critically important to the state and to the governor. And so I just really appreciate you being so dedicated to it and leading us through this work.
Thank you. Thanks so much from that. As the Deputy Chief of Staff knows, this was an early question when I started my tenure of like, so what's going on with that group? It is near and dear to me. So excited to have the support and moving this forward. I'm going to skip over to natural resources. Dave Gosshorn, representing Secretary Kurtz. Reflections?
Hi. Yeah, just one, and it follows on the resiliency comments made a few minutes ago. I already talked about reaching our 40 by 40 goals, so I won't elaborate on that, but that's a large part of our focus. But we're also paying more attention to the impacts of climate change, sea level rise, increased flooding, which obviously have important components to where and how we grow. And disproportionately so to some of our most disadvantaged communities. And so we're taking a lot of effort focused on how we adapt our programs that historically have been focused mostly on environmental restoration, and including in that improving the resiliency of our communities to the impacts of sea level rise and increased flooding and wildfires and so forth, because we can meet some of those go hand in hand. And so there are certain practices we can put in place that both help to restore Chesapeake Bay, but also help to protect our communities from flooding and sea level rise and so forth. So we're shifting our attention a little bit, and that obviously plays into smart growth. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks, David. Over to transportation, representing Department MDOT, Candice Holford. Candice, closing thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Secretary. So just top of mind for MDOT, we're looking forward to releasing the Maryland Transportation Plan as well as the 2050 Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan in 2024, and also launching implementation of our model Complete Streets initiative, which will really have us putting the A in our pedestrian safety action plan to work. So all of that will be kicking off in 2024 and really almost directly support a lot of our sustainable growth initiatives. And equally so, I'll just do a plug for our carbon reduction strategy. So MDOT is definitely interested in ways to effectively engage with the subcabinet and coordinate on implementing the strategy and updating it next year. The strategy covers a lot of our greenhouse gas mitigation activities. And within the strategy, there are activities and strategies that align with TOD, support Complete Streets, as well as the Federal Highway Administration's carbon reduction program. So lots to come in 2024.
Lots to look forward to. Thanks so much, Candice. I want to jump over to Secretary Day. Closing thoughts from DHCD.
Thank you again, Secretary Flora. Yeah, as I looked through not only the public comments, but also the topics and thoughts that we had received from others in preparation for this, one thing was clear to me, which is that most people who offered comment, and I find this in so many settings, acknowledge and recognize a shared concern about affordability and accessibility and attainability of housing. And so, I don't think there's much investment needed in me using my closing comments to make a debate or to address that debate, as there isn't much. But what I do notice is that there were a couple of comments that were oriented on a fundamental aspect of where our growth goes, and acknowledging the consternation in some communities about revitalization efforts, which naturally come with density, naturally come with adjacency challenges, disruption to the status quo and changes to community. And so I'd offer up, not only for the public, but critically for all of us, for the members of the subcabinet, just to bear in mind the fundamental principles that got us here, that Maryland has led on successfully in guiding where growth goes in order to achieve all of our environmental objectives and in order to achieve our community revitalization and ultimately equity objectives. So as we add to our sustainable communities framework, our smart growth visions and framework, I want to make sure that we remember the core principles that got us here. And I've been one of many on this team that have articulated the things that are missing and what we want to add. I think now is just a moment where I see from some of the comments that we want to make sure we don't forget where we came from and why this is such important work. So thank you again for the opportunity, and thanks for your leadership.
Great, well stated. Thank you, Secretary Day. I want to go over to Secretary Chaudhry for his thoughts.
Thank you, Secretary Flora and Secretary Day for your leadership here in the subcabinet. Not much to add. Just wanted to say, as a support agency, we are looking forward in 2024, continuing to support, implement the recommendations of the subcabinet. And we have our assessment unit, our construction, as well as our real estate team standing by to support all the agencies as we look forward and implement these recommendations.
Great, thank you. Thank you for being here. We haven't covered all the agencies, but in light of time, it is 11 o'clock. I am going to go ahead and move us towards adjournment. And when doing that, I just want to thank everybody for your interest, for your comments, for being here. This is a very important topic for the state of Maryland in our future growth. And so know that you have a group that's very invested and very committed and online. And I think the key word that I think you heard a lot of today is around collaboration across agencies, using this forum to do more collaboration and to get better alignment
across our different agencies with some of these programs. And so look forward to next year. And please, like I said, the comment form is up and always there on the webpage for the Smart Growth Subcabinet. So always free field to put in. We are going to pull those down monthly and share them with the subcabinet. So once again, thank you again. Take care, everybody. Meeting's adjourned.